Anthony Joshua has been referred to by many critics over the years as a robot, and this is usually in reference to his style and his biomechanics, the fact that his movements are somewhat robotic, especially when he comes in heavy, as he did for his last fight. When he's lighter, he tends to be a bit more fluid. But more than anything physical, the aspect of him which I think is most robot-like is his mind. The main difference between a human brain and a computer, other than sentience, is that a human brain has a much greater ability to learn on its own. A computer is far more heavily reliant on programming. It has to be told exactly how to respond in every conceivable scenario. It doesn't have the same degree of intuitive ability as a human brain. Now, I'm not saying that Anthony Joshua is an actual robot, but some humans are more robot-like in the way they think than others. And the more robotic a person's mind is, the more reliant they are on receiving instructions from a programmer, i.e. a trainer. That's why, in the case of AJ, he was asking Rob McCracken what to do during the first Andy Ruiz fight. That's why, right before the opening bell against Usyk, he was asking advice from Clifton Mitchell. That's why, for so many years, AJ employed this enormous team of experts and advisors to tell him what to do and when to do it, what to eat, when to eat, how to train, when to train. It's like, bruv, you're only preparing for a boxing match. It's not rocket science. You're not launching a space shuttle here. You don't need a team of 100 scientists working round the clock, day and night, performing endless calculations just to try and figure out the best way to punch a man in the face. It's not that deep. You're taking this sweet science thing a bit too literally, bruv. One of my favorite boxing analogies of all time is when Richard Dwyer compared Badu Jack and James DeGale to R&B versus jazz. R&B being more structured and formulaic, as opposed to jazz, which is more organic and intuitive. Now, some musicians are absolutely fantastic with a sheet of music in front of them. Their timing is absolutely impeccable and they never miss a beat. But if you take that sheet of music away and ask them to create a new song off the cuff with a bunch of other musicians, they're completely lost. They don't know which direction the song is going in from one moment to the next. All of a sudden, they're being forced to figure out which notes to play and when to play them on the fly, and they can't keep up. It requires a level of real-time intuition that some musicians just don't have. And it's similar in boxing. Some fighters are far more intuitive than others. They don't need a sheet of music to know which notes to play next. They don't need a set of instructions. They can figure it out for themselves. They can assess the situation in the ring and make the appropriate adjustments. A couple of famous examples would be Muhammad Ali when he fought George Foreman. He went completely against his corner's instructions in that fight, which is usually a disastrous thing to do. But Ali sensed and saw certain things in the ring that his team didn't pick up on. So when he got back to his corner and Angelo Dundee was admonishing him for laying on the ropes, Ali told him to shut up. I know what I'm doing. And evidently, he did know what he was doing because he knocked Foreman out in the 8th round. He figured it out for himself. A more recent example is Tyson Fury against Steve Cunningham. Gets dropped heavy in round 2, instantly realizes, I can't outbox this guy. He's too fast and too well coordinated. So when he gets up, as soon as he recovers, he changes the entire game plan and starts walking Steve Cunningham down behind the high guard, leaning on him and bullying him up close. And it worked. He wore Cunningham down and knocked him out. And his trainer, Peter Fury, wasn't even in the corner because he was banned from America. But Tyson didn't need anyone to hold his hand and walk him through it. He figured it out for himself. Now, obviously, even the greatest fighters need to be taught a certain amount. They don't learn how to box on their own from scratch. They need to be shown the basics. They need to be equipped with a set of tools. But what separates them from other fighters is their instinctive ability to know which tools to use and when to use them. It's more than just situational awareness. It's also the ability to problem solve. Being able to identify an issue is not enough. You need to know how to overcome it. This is why you can't tell how good a fighter is going to be by simply watching them hit a heavy bag, because bags don't hit back. The boxing brain and the will of the fighter is actually more important than the physical ability. I said in a recent video that some fighters require a father figure in their corner, but not the truly great fighters, in my experience. A couple of viewers countered this statement by citing the example of Mike Tyson and Cus D'Amato. Well, first of all, there's an exception to every rule. Secondly, whether Mike Tyson actually is that exception is debatable. It all depends on how you define greatness. And thirdly, what a lot of Mike Tyson fans neglect to mention is the fact that Cus D'Amato himself said, "I don't succeed when I make a guy become champion of the world. I succeed when I make that fellow become champion of the world and independent of me." So the end goal was for the fighter to eventually be able to detach from the father figure and stand on his own 2 feet. And many would argue that didn't actually happen with Mike Tyson, and Cus died before it could be achieved. In any event, for the purposes of this video, and for the sake of argument, let's say that Mike Tyson was a true great. In which case, the question is, what set him apart from most of the other fighters who needed a father figure? Why did he achieve greatness when most of them didn't? After all, Mike was a very emotional, quite fearful person by nature. He wasn't as naturally self-assured or independent-minded as a young Cassius Clay, for example. Mike needed a lot more help psychologically. And that's where Cus D'Amato comes in, because Cus wasn't a mere instructor. If we go back to the robot analogy for a second, Cus D'Amato was a master programmer. He knew exactly how to optimize the human psyche for the purposes of fighting. And with Mike Tyson, he had top-of-the-line hardware to work with. Speed, power, athleticism, balance, great reflexes, and, very importantly for a heavyweight, great punch resistance as well. And with these components, D'Amato was able to assemble the Terminator, basically, a wrecking machine. So yes, there are instances where a fighter with psychological weaknesses can become reprogrammed to overcome those weaknesses and become great. But it takes a master programmer, of which there are very few, and premium components for him to work with. Another example would be Vladimir Klitschko. He was often accused of being a robot, a guy who lost his way against Ross Purity, Corey Sanders, and Lamont Brewster and didn't know how to figure it out. Now, Manny Stewart wasn't exactly a father figure to him, but he certainly reprogrammed him. He created a routine and a formula for him to follow. It became disparagingly known as the jab, jab, grab routine. Not particularly pretty and not entirely legal, but very effective. And that brings us back onto the main subject of this video, Anthony Joshua. Just like Vladimir Klitschko, he isn't the most naturally intuitive fighter. Just like Klitschko, he's been left gun-shy after 3 defeats. Just like Klitschko, people are writing him off. When Vladimir lost to Brewster, even his own brother Vitaly was telling him he needed to retire. That's how bad it was. In his comeback fight, he got dropped by Deval Williamson. 2 fights later, he got dropped 3 times by Sam Peter. He looked unbelievably vulnerable. No one would have predicted he was about to go on a 10-year unbeaten run. It seemed improbable to say the least, but it happened. Manny Stewart was able to rebuild and reprogram him. The question is, can Derek James do a similar job with Anthony Joshua? Can he turn the Tin Man into the Terminator? Well, he has similar components to work with, as Manny Stewart had with Klitschko, and I think he has the know-how. The question is, does he have the time? Only Eddie Hearn and AJ himself have the answer to that. In a recent interview, Bernd Bonta, the ex-manager of the Klitschkos, predicted that Anthony Joshua is about to regain the heavyweight title and go on a long unbeaten run at the top, just like Vladimir did. He said he just needs a couple of fights to gel with his new trainer. Now, personally, I don't see it. Vladimir was not only bigger and stronger, but also more talented than all his competition. It allowed him to break his opponents down behind the safety of his jab. Anthony Joshua doesn't have that luxury. At 6'6" and 255 pounds, AJ isn't the biggest nor the strongest of the current crop of heavyweights. He is more versatile than Vladimir, though, I'll give him that. He throws much better short punches, has a wider repertoire, and he's more explosive. But even with those extra tools, I don't think it will be enough to put together a long, unbeaten run at the top. In fact, I don't think any heavyweight of this current era can remain unbeaten at the top if they take on all comers, Usyk and Fury included. I've been saying this for years, long before AJ and Wilder got beaten. The division is too stacked. Anyone saying the division is shallow just doesn't know what they're talking about. The same type of people were saying the exact same thing about the division back in the 1990s. I remember it well. Yet today we look back on the 90s as the second golden era of heavyweight boxing after the 70s. People never appreciate what they have until it's gone. AJ is at a crossroads right now. Which path he chooses to take depends on how much passion he has left for the sport. If he's tired of boxing and he's only sticking around for the money, he'll take the shortcut, which gets him to a title shot quickly, but he'll be underprepared when he gets there. But if he still loves the sport and still cares about legacy, he'll take the long road and rebuild under Derek James. The long road won't guarantee him success in a championship showdown, but he'll be much better prepared when he gets there. Are you sick and tired of the mainstream mindset? Does the dogmatic conformity and pathological ignorance have you tearing your hair out in frustration? Then don't be alone. Come and join our brotherhood on Patreon. We stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. You'll gain access to my weekly topical podcast where we take more deep dives than Jacques Cousteau on an endless variety of subjects. There's also videos, interviews, live Q&As, as well as a vast back catalogue of previous episodes, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen via the Patreon app or download in high-quality MP3. Connect with myself and hundreds of other members in our Element chat group. There's no contract, no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a Mickey D's McMuffin. Just head to my Patreon page via the link below this video and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. I'll see you over there. Oh yeah, we out here. We out here, bro. Don't get swept off your feet.